Kevin Viken is an LCDPT alumni who's also been working for Spencer Medical Staffing as a travel physical therapist for the past year. So far, he's been in 3 different locations, 2 have been in Virginia and 1 in North Dakota. This afternoon, Kevin is here to talk to you today regarding the basics of travel physical therapy, the pros and cons of working for a travel therapy company, as well as to share his experiences so far. Please welcome Kevin.
Alright, so yeah, feel free to take notes, ask questions at the end. Alright, so so this is sort of the breakdown. When I was in school here at LC, I didn't really know where I wanted to go, so I didn't stay solely in ortho, solely in acute care, so sort of branched around a little bit and kind of dabbled my feet in every aspect I could. And so far as a travel therapist, I've just kind of worked my odds. I've been inpatient, outpatient, a little bit of nursing homes. But the big thing why you're all here is, why does everyone do travel? Most people do it because they're not quite sure about the setting. Some people do it for the money, and others, they just want to see the US. A little bit of 3. So ultimately, the first 2 things, before you decide to do travel therapy, you want to find an accountant or a tax individual, and then you want to kind of test the waters with each travel company you can find. Some are good, some are bad. Called them multiple times. Really, it's not the travel company per se, it's the recruiter. The company is just really a logo, all right? The recruiter is the one that's gonna find you the jobs, get you the best rate. That's the one you're gonna wanna go to in the long run. Selecting a contract. So each contract's anywhere between 13 weeks to 12 months. Ideally, if you wanna, I'll talk a little bit more about the tax breaks, but minimum's 13 weeks. Longest you want to potentially stay in a rotation is 12 months. But when selecting it, you want 3 things. Clinical setting, what's the rate you want, and then the location. So if you want to be in a big city, you want to do pediatrics, you're probably going to take home a very small salary. All right, so these are things you want to weigh out. But ultimately, there is a job out there. So if you like peds, if you like SNF, if you like inpatients, you'll find something out there. Okay, and like Lisa was saying, I mean, I've been all across the US for the most part, so you'll see a little bit of everything. So negotiating the contract. There's a few things that you're gonna, ultimately when you find the recruiter you wanna look to work with. You're gonna talk about CEUs, because ultimately you need CEUs to renew your license every year, or every 2 years, depending on the state. You're gonna talk about guaranteed hours. Okay, you don't want to go move to a brand new location in the middle of nowhere and they only give you 20 hours. Okay, you can't feed yourself and you really can't live off of that. So you talk about guaranteed hours. Sometimes it's 32, sometimes it's 40. They really don't want you to go overtime because then they're paying a huge bill towards you. But guaranteed hours, usually you want to look towards 32, 35 hours. Some places they do 40. Housing, we'll talk a little bit more about housing. Length of contract, 13 weeks to 12 months. Rate and salary, and then whenever you want to take vacation. All right, so CEUs, depends on the company, and this is something you negotiate with your recruiter. Some they'll do in person, some they'll do online. Sometimes they'll pay for the whole thing, sometimes they'll pay for half of it. It really just depends on the recruiter that you find and the company that he or she works for. Housing, so this is gonna be your biggest burden. There for 13 weeks. Most places they take 6 months to 12-month leases. Okay, this is gonna be your biggest burden. A lot of people think about when they say travel company pays for the whole thing. They pay for the car, they pay for housing. They do, but you're gonna take 20 bucks home for each hour you work because they're gonna take away 85 to 90% of your check. Okay, your money's made mostly in stipends. Okay, so if you want to sort of save a little extra, you can do that second bullet point. So you're gonna find your own. So far I found my own throughout my entire travels. Hasn't been too bad. I mean, I've lived in, it's gonna sound bad, I've lived in a basement of a family home. I've lived in a, yeah, it sounds bad, but I've lived in the basement of a family home. I've lived in a split apartment. This last one I was at, I lived in paid for a room. I lived in I think the house was valued at $400,000. Lived in paid $660 a month for it. And then right now I'm currently living in a small apartment. So you have to take each town for what it's worth. Some people, they use these websites. I can't really see them from here. Airbnb, Craigslist, and something called VRBO. These are places to sort of look. If it really gets desperate, you can reach out to local organizations, so churches, schools, places that you can potentially sublease from. And if you have the cash, you can buy an RV and travel the country. So haven't quite gotten there yet. But yeah, so the last bullet point though, if your company finds it, they'll hook you up with a furnished apartment. But like I said, you're gonna take them a very small paycheck. Very, very small. But those are the people that usually are retired, they don't really care, and they just want to see the country. Alright? So, time at work. So you're usually gonna work between 30 and 40 hours. This is that guarantee that you wanna look for. So most companies will say, oh, we'll give you 40, but you wanna ask for that guarantee. So if they do shortchange you an hour, they're gonna pay you regardless. Alright, so they're not wasting your time, you're not wasting theirs. And then the length. So you want to be between 13 weeks is sort of the minimum, 12 months is the max. After 12 months, the government sort of deems you as a permanent resident of that area. So you don't get quite the tax breaks that you originally would have had. Okay. The perks breakdown. So most of your pay is going to be stipend based. So you're going to get paid very low base pay that's taxed. And then the rest of it's stipend, so it's tax-free, okay? With that being said, you need to be somewhere between 50 and 90 miles away from your tax home, otherwise the stipends don't count, okay? They get counted in towards regular pay. Some companies you can negotiate for gas and mileage reimbursement depending on how far away you're traveling from the apartment that you're renting, or if you're traveling in between jobs. Sometimes they'll give you a fleet car. So I had that in North Dakota. I was traveling between 3 clinics over the course of an hour each day. So they gave me a fleet car. So I drove their car and I had to pay for gas the entire time I was up there. And you're gonna negotiate the salary at the end of each contract. So your friends who are working as therapists in a full-time gig, they're probably gonna negotiate their salary after the first year, maybe 2 years. You get to negotiate every 13 weeks at the minimum, okay? So 12 months at the max, 13 weeks at the minimum. So after the 13 weeks, you find a new gig or renew your contract and you say, okay, this was fun, but either I worked harder than what I thought I should have been getting paid for, or it was equal and I just wanted to continue it on. Vacation. So you set your dates at the beginning of each contract. So like I'm going down to a wedding next weekend. So beginning of this contract that I currently took, I said I need the weekend of the 7th off. And so that way you're guaranteed those days. You're not gonna walk into a company and they're gonna say you have to work these, otherwise we're getting rid of you. So they already know up front what days you're taking off, and sometimes they're pretty lenient. So you might work a Sunday before or a Saturday after to make up the time. And then you get to take time off between contracts. So sometimes contracts don't fall back to back. Sometimes they might be a week in between, depends on how far you have to travel, and then also how far away the timelines are, when one company might need you versus when your current one ends. So you might be in the middle of Utah, and before your next contract, you have a week off. So that's sort of what they call vacation time. You're in the middle of a new state, just go out and venture, okay? So there's some unexpected vacation time, but also there's expected. Now what's saying for vacation though, is that if you take vacation, depending on the healthcare coverage you have, the only reason I'm saying this is because my boss wanted me to sort of branch it out because I ran into this issue this summer, is I took 2 months off this summer. I wanted to take 3, but because of my healthcare coverage, after the 2 months I would have taken off, I would have had to pay a penalty towards the US government, okay? So I had to cut my 3-month vacation short, which sucked because I wanted to take 3 months off and see the US. But with that being said though, it really just depends on what you have planned out with your company and then what you want to do individually. And you can also plan it out. I knew going into travel I was going to take between May and July off, so that's what I did. Okay, and you work your contracts around that. All right. So first day orientation, this is what you should expect at the beginning of every single contract, okay? New facility, new staff, new documentation system, nothing's the same. And depending on how familiar you are with the company or you are as an individual, they may give you 60 minutes, like I had this morning at my new job, or sometimes they'll give you a day. So I had a day when I was in North Dakota and I was in charge of 3 separate facilities, rural hospital, 2 outpatient clinics, and 2 SNFs, only PT in 50 miles. They gave me a full day to learn the system, learn the facilities. If you're in charge of a small facility, they'll usually give you about an hour or 2. So you have to be sort of on the ball. So far, my experience has been in Orange, Virginia, Lakota, Mattville, North Dakota, and then Charlottesville, Virginia. And currently, I'm in Marion, Virginia. So sort of the breakdown of my contracts, because each one changes differently. So I was in a 200 bed SNF. I did 50 beds for the assisted living facility. I worked with a pretty decent sized staff. It was nice because I had a mentor right out of school. I know the professors push that. So when I had my first gig or first contract or job, I luckily had a mentor who was doing PT for 40, 50 years. So she helped me learn the ropes about nursing home, outpatient ortho in that regard. But sometimes you're the only PT, so you have to be, like I said, pretty confident with your skills, your mindset on the job. All right. Second contract, this was when I was a little more independent. A little scary at first when I signed the contract. Like I said, I was in charge of 10-person bed hospital, 2 outpatient clinics, and 2 SNFs. Only PT in 50-mile radius. But it was nice though. I worked with pediatrics, I worked with high schoolers in the mornings. I worked with farmers who weren't growing crops at the time because there's ice everywhere. And then local contractors for the most part. So it was nice. Got to see some industrial work type stuff that wasn't true outpatient ortho. And then my third clinic, mostly middle-aged geriatric SNF. All right, so pros and cons. I've kind of touched base on them a little bit. Ultimately, your contract's gonna be anywhere between 13 weeks to 12 months. You're gonna meet new people throughout the US, depending on where you go. Because you make a little bit more money, because it's tax-free, you get to pay off your loans a little faster, versus people who take a steady full-time gig in one location. You get to trial numerous settings and locations out, so if you're not quite sure where you want to live, what setting you want to be in, you get to trial these out. Like I said, it's usually 13 weeks, sometimes you can make them longer. And you get to take vacation when you want. You can take vacation when you plan it, or sometimes it's unplanned, okay? But there always are some cons to the pros. The con is you're usually away from family, friends, for the most part. You don't really get to build that client-practitioner relationship because you're there, you show up, and then you leave in a very short time frame. If you don't like to move, this is not your job that you would want, because I'm constantly packing and unpacking. If it doesn't fit in my Honda Civic, I don't take it. Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. And then, so one con is that your contract could get pulled short. So usually you're filling in because the company, either someone's on maternity or paternity leave, or because they can't find anyone in that location. So if they find somebody partway through your contract that could fill in permanently, then they can give you 2 weeks. So you may show up and say, okay, I'm here for 13 weeks, and then 3 weeks in, they give you 2-week notice because they just hired a new person. So you have to be very, very flexible, and you're kind of flying by the whim of your seat for the most part. It's good if you like it, it's bad if you don't. All right. So it's hard to get sort of a niche for the most part because you're constantly changing environments. So right now I'm in the middle of the mountains. I've been here since August, but then when I was in North Dakota, there was nothing around. Middle of the tundra, there was nothing. So you have to figure out what niche you like and then kind of adapt to the environment that you're in at the time. I can't see. Sorry.
You can look behind.
Yeah. And so that really the bottom one is the multiple state license. So you're very limited when you go to find the contracts or find the locations that you're trying to get. you're limited only by your state contract, or state license that you have. So if you only have Virginia, there's only 3 gigs in Virginia, you and 50 other travel contract therapists are competing for those 3 jobs. So the more you have, the more options you have, okay? Now with that being said, they're kind of pricey. Some you'll spend, I think DC, you'll spend anywhere between $300-400 for a license, and it takes a little bit, whereas California, it might be $200, but it takes 6 months to get. And so you have to weigh that in as well when you're trying to figure out where you're gonna go next. So if you're trying to say, oh, I'm gonna go to California next, you're applying today, you have that 6-month window at least just to get your license, okay? But with that being said, there's a little bit of legislative work going through for the Interstate License Compact. Have they talked to you all about this at all? No? Okay, I'm gonna see a lot of head shake. So this is sort of in the works for the most part. What this is supposed to be is similar to how a driver's license works. So you learn how to drive in your home state, and you go to another state, they don't make you take a driver's license to drive in that state. So these right now are the states that are, I guess, they agreed upon this compact. And so if you have a license in one of these states, when it becomes effective, you can work in any of these other states and just pay a small fee. You don't have to go through the whole application process. You just pay $50 or however much they're gonna charge you, send in an application saying, I'm gonna work in your state for a certain amount of weeks or months, and then they say, go ahead. Versus having to take the 2, 3 weeks, 6 months to process your application. The important take-home message, important take-home facts that you'll always have is, so you always want to find your housing. Otherwise you're gonna be basically doing slave labor. You're not gonna be making much. So always find your own housing. You want to always have a little money in the bank. So you don't want to say, okay, I'm making X amount each week, because sometimes it fluctuates, and put it all towards loans or a new car, or if you're trying to buy a house somewhere, because you never know if you're gonna have a gap in between your contracts, okay? So if you have a gap in between your contracts, and you have a car payment, or a house payment, or you have a student loan payment, they're not gonna come and chase you down, but you're gonna potentially owe more in the long run. Car, house payment, they may come home and rebuild things that you might have. So you wanna have a little bit in the bank just in case, if there's a gap in your contract. You wanna be your own advocate. Some companies will try to take advantage of you because you are a new grad. With that being said though, you have to know your limitations, your scope of practice, what you can and can't do, and then sort of the ethical side of it too, okay? You wanna find the recruiter that best fits you. So don't seek out the company per se, seek out the recruiter that's gonna find you the best job, best salary, it's gonna work best for you. And then you wanna find a decent tax accountant, because they're the ones that are gonna help you figure out the pros and cons to saving a little in the long run, especially with stipends. And then have a reliable vehicle, because you don't want to be halfway on the road between contracts, or even on a contract, and then your car breaks down. So questions? Yes?
How does health insurance work?
So there's 2 options. So either you can find your own through Humana, Aetna, or it depends, like I said, depends on the company. Right now, my company offers 4 plans. I can pay anywhere between $12 a week, which equals about $50 a month. And my deductible is I think $6 grand, or I can pay $100 a week, and I think my deductible is gonna be like $20. So really, it depends on what you want and how much you need of the healthcare, I guess per se, or health insurance. With health insurance though, if you leave, so say if you are going on vacation like I was in May, basically, I'm covered to the end of that month that I paid into, but then I start the COBRA plan for 2 months. It's only good for 60 days, and then, so when I was on vacation, I basically had COBRA. And then when I came back, I could either retro pay all that money for COBRA and continue my current plan, or I had to start a new plan, which is what I did. And so you're sort of limited by that. Now, after those 2 months, depending on this whole healthcare reform bill that they're deciding on, and whether they want to tax people for not having health insurance or not, that's why I had to cut my vacation short, is because I didn't have health insurance for that time frame, for those 2 months. And then starting the third month, I would have had to pay a penalty for that. So that's why I had to cut my vacation short. So it really just depends on you being informed and then what you want. So if you are okay with paying that extra $200 or being on Cobra, then you can do whatever you want. Yeah. Anyone else got a question? Yes.
Yes. So in regards to specialization after graduating PT school, it sounds like this site might not be the best choice if you're looking to specialize.
No, if you're looking to specialize, this would not be your case. This is more so, I mean, if you're trying to specialize potentially in geriatrics, because there's always gonna be home health, there's always gonna be SNF jobs, but if you're trying to specialize, this probably wouldn't be your best fit. I think these jobs are mostly for individuals who aren't quite sure what they want to do or where they want to be, or if they're looking for a quick way to pay off their loans or a quick way to save up for a house or a car. That's kind of the reason why I jumped into it, was because I looked at what I could be making if I joined a typical outpatient ortho clinic or even a SNF, and then how much the government would take away from me, and then in addition to what I'd be paying for loans, and I realized that I couldn't afford to do that. Not to freak you all out, but yeah. Anyone else got a quick? Yes, ma'am.
You're talking about a recruiter, so I think you can find.
Oh, so I think are they gonna have this PowerPoint at all?
Yeah, I can share it. Yeah.
So I put a list of travel companies, and basically what you do is you Google them, find the general 1-800 number, call them, or you usually you fill out a survey and then you submit it, and then a recruiter calls you. And so they call you, you talk to them, doesn't feel like it works, then you just hang up the phone and wait for another one to call you. All right, you're technically your own boss, okay? These people are taking a cut to find you a job, but you're your own boss for the most part. So you have to kind of find which one works best for you and then go from there.
And for you, when you went to 3 different jobs, is that the same recruiter?
Yep.
Or,
Yeah. So right now, I'm a big fan of my recruiter. He's found me some decent locations. I get more of a take home with the stipends versus the base pay, which is nice. So when I looked at other companies, the base pay was a little higher, stipends were a little lower, and so, but they're also bigger companies. And so with the bigger companies per se, mine's really small, but with the bigger companies, you have to think about the overhead. So you're their, like a typical SNF or any kind of other rehab center, you're their income, you're their mule horse. So if there's a large company per se, you're bringing in X amount and then you're getting Y. And so you have to realize, okay, how much are they capping me off at versus another company might cap me off at. So that's what you have to sort of weigh pros and cons with. And that was sort of where I went with it. Now the larger company might get you more, your foot further in other doors per se. There might be more locations for you to pick out of, but you still have to factor in that overhead potentially. Yeah. Yes.
If you have a certification in something or a specialization, do you have a broader range of places that you could go to? Are there like clinics that are looking for a travel PT who may be like lymphedema specialist or something, or are they just always like any kind of generalist?
Yeah, so basically what happens when you apply for a contract is your recruiter sends off your resume, which would be on there, and then they look at it, see if you're a best fit for that location. And of course, if someone with an identical resume has everything but that specialty, they may pick you over it. But if you're asking for a ridiculous amount as well, they might not pick you. So it really just depends on what you're trying to get out of it. But of course, anything that boosts your resume is gonna make you look better on it. But for the job offers, yes. Yes, sir.
Are there any travel companies that pay off student loan debt forgiveness?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Usually it's, you're responsible for it for the most part. And that's just, like I said, stipends, that's sort of the basis for the stipends, is that it's tax-free and you can usually use that to pay it off.
Okay.
I mean, I guess an easy example is that my student loan payoff would have been half my salary as a full-time job. It's a fourth of my income right now, depending on where I'm at, okay? Depending on the rate that I get, it can be anywhere between a fourth to a third of what I bring in every month, okay? So that's sort of I guess the basis of it. Yeah, but I don't think they would pay it off. If they did, they would give you a lower rate than what they would pay, yeah. And that's the same thing with pay time off as well. I know some companies will give you pay time off. Either you can save your money for pay time off and put it away, or what some companies do is they'll take a little extra out of your paycheck and just put it in a basically sub account of their company, and then when you wanna take your 2 weeks off that you agreed upon, they'll just pay you off during that 2 weeks. So it's either you can be responsible, or you can let them be responsible for you. Alright, although I can't see behind the pillar, so I don't know if you want to raise my hand or not. Alright. Feel free to ask, yeah.
As far as applying for licensures in other states, do certain states have, you don't have to take a test again, right, for like state regulation kind of?
Yeah, so you won't ever have to take the boards again unless you miss out on renewing one of your license. Usually when you send off, or you apply for another, after you take the boards and you get your license, in whatever state you're in, you, instead of applying through the test, you apply through endorsement. So whatever your home state is, endorses you so you get your license. And so you may have to take a jurisprudence test, which is basically the law version, but the legal aspect of that state, but it's usually a 20, 50 question test. You usually don't pay for it. Maybe DC might make you pay for it, but most states don't. It's usually online, or it's a form you print out, fill it out, and then fax it in. Yeah. All right. Well. If you have any questions, just my email. If you can either too shy or think of something in the long run, feel free to shoot me an email, and yeah.